So hello, Lucas. Hello, Paul. I am very happy to have you here today. So basically, we are here to talk about the peer feedback, the value that it can provide, and and all the stuff around the scientific writing that fits into that. At the beginning, when I came, I'm not sure I was. I mean, of course, the peer feedback that is part of my workshops, but it turned out to be the big thing for you guys, right? I mean, of course, you learned the other basics like paragraphs and sentences, some productivity stuff, but the peer feedback, I had the feeling that was something. Can you comment on that?
I think mostly it's because before we have not really reflected on the feedback. So it's important that you get to know the rules of feedback once, and then you can self-regulate a lot better. And you find out how to deliver feedback effectively. That's something that is easy to learn and super useful, but you have to be aware that's something that needs to be learned. Right? Mm-hmm. That's something you have to practice.
Yeah, I think that's really the point, the practice part. So I mean, you learn the concepts during the workshop, but it's not like, okay, now I learned it, now I can apply it. And it's really, you have to beat that into your head, so to say.
Oh man, and I suck at this. I suck at this so bad. So the other day I was explaining something to a friend. It was some R. I didn't really understand it myself, but she needed help. And I was trying to explain and give feedback on her code. And was like, oh man, you're doing this, like thinking to myself, I'm doing this all wrong. Like,
yeah, I think the peer feedback groups help to, remind you of all the things that you wanted to do better. And you kind of, you keep iterating on these steps and improving. Otherwise, you would go back to business, so to say, as you did before.
So what were the rules of the good feedback that you learned by practice and that you think is really essential?
So one big aspect is the whole, how is the feedback perceived concept. This includes what do you focus on, but mostly how do you communicate it. So if you just trash talk someone, of course your feedback will not be heard, and then the whole exercise becomes pointless. And that's something where we still spend a lot of time with playing around and experimenting. I feel that. I mean, you notice, Martina, our feedback culture is rough, and very often there is no fluffy, flowery words that sugarcoat things if they don't deserve to be sugarcoated. And that's tough, right? And you have to know what people you can do this with, because if I do this with friends, they totally you can see it, right? You're being direct, and you're telling them, so that's good, and that sucks completely. You have to, and they don't listen anymore. So. Try to be nice is probably a good summary, and you can dialing back on the artificial niceness if people know you and have training. But that's a very important step. People only listen when they somehow like what they're hearing.
Yeah, I think that's from the people that give feedback, and for the feedback seekers, so to say, it's really important to be specific. So it doesn't help, okay, here's my text, now give me feedback, because then people will get into these, small details where you're also upset that they now want to edit those parts, and
they can't help you with it, right?
Exactly.
It's because everyone focuses on something specific that does not improve the document overall, because then you have another 5 construction sites in addition to the 10 you are already working on then. The whole feedback thing became more of a subtle part that's a constant background condition. So in across various projects, you always write on text and you always collaborate with people. So there is feedback happening all the time. And it's good to stick to these guidelines whenever they're required. So I can't pinpoint how often we have feedback rounds anymore. To me, it feels something very natural now that is constantly there, really.
But then, if I understood it correctly, then it's mostly among co-authors, right? So if you are collaborating with someone, then this is the person who will give you feedback. Or do you also give it, or you also ask for feedback other group members that are not collaborators on the particular project?
Both. I mean, so I wrote a paper together with Fabian, and yeah, we had, of course, very regular iterations between ourselves, but also at some point we put it out and we got feedback from people that were not at all involved in that research. And that was really, I think, where the decisive feedback came from, where we said, okay, this communication doesn't work at all. This point's not clear and so on. And I mean, you also mentioned the point, what to specify if you don't know what's the problem. It's typically the easiest thing if you think there's a paragraph or so where you think, okay, the message is not clear, then just ask, okay, do you understand what this is about? And then people will immediately, okay, I have no idea what this paragraph wants to tell me. And then you can together look for the problem where the communication failed, so to say. So really like hierarchical, starting with the, let's say, most fundamental problem, which is, can you understand what's in this thing? And then you can go down and see if it's the sentence structure or and so on. Yeah.
Nice. Paul, you were busy with the COVID paper, I guess, until recently.
There was another one.
Oh, another one. Okay.
That was basically driven by Jonas and Seva, who are like, he's new, or was new, so the newest PhD student. And this was for me a nice situation to give feedback to an existing project. So I did not have anything to do with that because I was on vacation. And then I came back and Viola wanted me to do figures and to look over the whole thing. So I came completely from the outside and could just say, guys, what is this? And that is refreshing for both parties. I like both sides, I would say, because you get something external that has this blank page. And if notation is not clear, you will find that out very quickly. Like concepts, you find friction points that you start overlooking the longer you stare at them.
I think that's something that Viola kind of also tries to push a bit now, that we have kind of these paper buddies. So we have essentially co-authors whose task is essentially to help that paper and to get the whole project become clear. So it's you get acknowledged by being part of that paper, like being co-author, but essentially you're like an editor for that paper and make sure that it is clear and so on. So I did that also with the paper with Matthias, and that was also extremely helpful for him to have someone that is not the supervisor, but that is really knows about the project and can kind of help with the communication parts.
And if you want to really contribute in making the text better, or contribute to making the text better, you have to understand the content. So it's the task of the primary author to explain to you what is happening, and ideally do it through his text. And if the text doesn't communicate it, then it's your task to find out and then make the text better. And that way, everyone ends up understanding the whole thing much better. I think it's great. And I do this. So I do this with everything, and I usually pick Johannes just to, here's some stuff. And because we are well co-aligned with projects, we know about each other's project. And so you have like your paper buddy for everything. It's really useful.
Nice. Sounds good. So you are a productive group now, yeah? Writing a lot of papers?
I mean, there's still, if one has these close collaborations, then there's, for me, it's still kind of a challenge, good collaborative writing. So how do you, so it's one thing is to, have one author that writes the paper and then you just give feedback and you explain, here I would do this different, and you just give suggestions. This is a very lengthy process because it can be frustrating because you only give the suggestions. In the end, it's the first author that decides what to take and not. And sometimes you're frustrated because you think that solution would be really better, and then this will not be incorporated. On the other hand, if you become too invasive and you really edit the text, then people also get frustrated if their text gets,
Yeah.
So it's a very, I haven't found out the most efficient way to do this, to be honest.
I would argue that there is no efficient way. So this is inherently the problem that you have multiple authors, consequently multiple opinions and styles. And if you want to have a consistent paper, there can only be one person that writes, but that's exhausting for the person. The other option would be to compromise on a consistent style. And then you can easily or easier compromise on paragraphs. So I have this problem that when I see a text and I immediately know what I would do different, or I quickly find out what I would do different, it usually boils down to sentence structure and how to split paragraphs. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's not so super invasive because the content stays mostly the same and the message stays the same. Mm-hmm. But it's nice to have these two versions of the text side by side, and then the main author can pick what he likes.
Yeah, I think that's also in the end what we settled with a bit. But there were situations where I just changed like formulations, and this was really no-go. So
yeah,
because then, or at least without proper explaining what happened. So this is really a part where it becomes too invasive if it's about these small things. So,
sure, especially because it's these little nitty details where you fiddle a long time, and then you have this one formulation nailed, and you think that's the one, and the rest of the paragraph really doesn't matter. It's all just this one tiny phrase, and author number 2 comes along and throws that one phrase out because he doesn't like it. It's like,
or maybe it just doesn't fit, That's
yeah, exactly.
Often you pick one sentence and you forget the rest of the paragraph. Yeah. Then when you see it, then it just doesn't fit, and you are like, whatever. I love the one sentence, I keep it. Yeah.
What really helped me in that sense is to let go. So that's something that I keep discovering every time I'm done with a text. It's all much nicer and much easier if you don't care too much.
Yeah.
Let go of it.
Since I have been the last time at your group, I developed a more nuanced approach to the feedback. That basically you start with the feedback before you start writing. That you first basically present only the figures with captions and tell a story, and see whether that makes sense, and get feedback on that. Yeah, so whether this makes sense. Then if that kind of you get the basic story, then the next step is to give a talk. In the talk, you also have an introduction. You should have some discussion. You will get you will get questions. You will get these phases like, what the hell is that? Yeah, so you get a lot of feedback, and then you only start writing the first draft. Yeah. So basically, already you are at the level that you can't have some major stuff wrong because you already got so much feedback before you wrote the first sentence.
I feel that this would benefit the scientific community. Basically thinking the other way around. Usually what we do is we work, we finish it, we write it down, and then we give a talk about it at a conference because it's like, yeah, just published in Nature. There you go. And that's bad because you have all this tedious pipeline and you don't get feedback on time. But if you make a talk about something that you do not feel secure about, it's hard to do, but it will help you. And you're the main one that should benefit from such a type of talk. But I don't know what the perfect audience for such a talk would be.
Your group, I guess, and maybe the neighboring group, like something like an institute colloquium or something. I think there are issues to present this on a conference. It's unpublished, it's
exactly.
That's not gonna work. But maybe your group, or maybe you handpick a couple of people that that they know about this stuff. If it's something interdisciplinary and people from your group are not the best experts, then you handpick your audience for this talk. It can be maybe just 5 people that, and then.
I mean, sometimes that just happens accidentally. Like just last week, I asked Lukas and Jonas for some help with something that I'm facing, and just to give them context to go to the point where they can answer the question I had to summarize what we do, and that way you get also content questions that you did not ask yourself. That's nice. It's exactly the type of feedback you need to develop the project in your mind.
Exactly. And Lukas, you want to say something?
It's really, I mean, this kind of questions, they really, that's kind of an integral question for the whole scientific process, right? So there's this one idea put forward by Julian Kircher. He wrote this book, The Lean PhD, and it's kind of, you try to use a technique from startups. It's called rapid prototyping and the minimal viable product. So you want to push that out as soon as possible to get feedback on your project or your ideas, and then you can incorporate that and iterate. You want to get to that point that you can iterate as fast as possible. And
I wanted to give a talk on this, right?
Yeah, I wanted to.
Yeah, please do.
But I think the key ingredient for these iterations to work is clarity. So it's not, so what I always did when I wrote my texts initially, I thought they would have to be like beautiful or let's say fancy sounding or so. So I mean, I used words that I found were, gave the whole thing more weight, but in the end they just made it unclear. And that's what it's about. It's really about people have to understand what you're doing, and you have to be clear about what do I actually want to do with this project. And then essentially there's little points where you can go wrong because people give you the feedback that you need, and then you improve, and this way it gets better. But one really has to let go of all the fancy toppings and so on, and really it's about clarity and early iterations, I would say.
But that's a very difficult and very, very high level understanding that you have gained already. This, I mean,
but I'm not practicing it.
It takes a year to get there. It's great.
And I mean, we try to practice that even now from the project design. So we have this one group meeting where we focus on a small topic, let's say, or a special topic. And we have a lot of master students that started their thesis, and they were given really broad topics, so to say. And we found that it's really hard to define really a precise project, and that's essentially what you should start off with before you even start a simulation. You want to be clear, what is my goal, so to say. Just doing this once with peers is super helpful. So we forced each other to be really specific about what's the project goal, and for a lot of them it became really okay, this is what I want to focus on, and it's much easier to work like this than this just exploration. And
because you explore in all directions. If you don't have this early feedback, you go and run in a random direction, and you realize that was pointless, and then you turn around and run again.
So working with peers is really helpful, as you are saying, as you are demonstrating with your work. Now, what do you think? Why is it so hard to convince people to give it a try?
It's really hard. It's really hard to, I mean, as Paul said, just to be able to get our feedback, he had to put a lot of work into preparing it. And it's kind of nasty work, because you think that's what our brain suggests to us, that you're on top of it. Okay, I made these plots, I know why, I understand the things. So why do I have to now put these, correct access labels? I know what's in there, and why do I have to, make the thing understandable? Or also this question, why am I actually doing what I'm doing? It's a nasty question if you really follow it to the core, so to say. But it's the important questions. But I think it's just Bequemlichkeit,
convenience, comfort zone.
Convenience,
It's just very hard to do. That's why we kind of shy away from it.
And you kind of you expose yourself, right? It's on the very other end of the spectrum. On the one hand, you feel like you're on top of your game, as you suggested, but when you open up for feedback, you run into the danger of being exposed, of not being on top of your game. So that's totally not intuitive for us, and we have to just let go, right? That's, again, letting go is hard.
And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes when you're, I mean, if you worked like 2 weeks, you just thought about, okay, what's my project about? And then you just put, okay, I mean, I have these ideas, but I'm really uncertain about them. Then it's a different story than after half a year you come and, actually I have no idea what I'm doing. I spent half a year on, it just becomes more painful the more you wait.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about this COVID paper, this science paper. I was really, I saw it, it came to me from my social network somehow. So this was a very fast one. I think, Paul, you were on that, right?
Yeah.
So how was that? The data is from March. The paper was submitted in April, right? And in May it was out.
It was exhausting in that sense because this is a difficult to answer thing. So on one hand it was exhausting, on the other hand it was great because you had a lot of people working on the same thing and it was the top priority for everyone. So that is usually not the case on other projects. But this only happened because we knew that it is timely and there is a hard deadline, and so yeah. In terms of the science, it was quite iterative and there was a lot of fine-tuning while text was already produced. So that's something one should maybe implement in everyday work too. That you start writing just for yourself in a more relaxed content to have something to work with. And this will enable you to follow your own thoughts later much nicer. So this is the whole lab book idea. But here it was more fast-paced and distributed among people. Now, what turned out to be difficult is how to collaborate with people on text and to improve text in these fast-paced iterations. Then you have these online text editors like Codeimbey, where everyone can work on the same document in real time or share LaTeX. And then all of a sudden you start standing on each other's feet in that sense. And it's difficult to work around this. And one takeaway inside was to assign an editor in charge from the project who is responsible for the whole document. He delegates sections.
Nice.
But in the end, he makes the decisions. And in this case, this was Michael Wilczek, who's basically was not the senior author in that sense because Viola somehow managed the whole project, but he was really the text managing director, and that was very useful.
That helped. I can imagine, especially when the tempo is fast, that everyone is working. So you, like, all co-authors were writing something, or most of you?
Yeah. What I tried to, so everyone was writing little sections, and I know Johannes and I wrote a discussion early on that just went to the trash at some point. So it's just this what happens, right? You write a discussion and someone else writes a discussion, you have to side by side and you pick the points that are important, and sometimes it just turns out to be a different project altogether. So if it turned out that the project just went elsewhere. We started off with a simple prediction and we realized we want to make this more complicated, or not more complicated, but to capture more effects, and corrections were added. And then he realized that the discussion just does not relate to the original article or the work anymore. And then you have to rewrite it. But then it helps to let go.
Yeah, but I bet that because of you wrote the wrong discussion, that helped you to get faster to the right one.
Definitely, yeah. And also for Johannes and me, it was nice to see what's important to us, and then to see how that is important to people that know the field and that are more from this Bayesian context, for whom this was completely crystal clear. So we were really discussing on obvious points, and no need for that in many cases. I see.
Yeah, that can happen.
No, but to summarize, this was amazing, great insight. I'm very happy that I was able to take part in this, and we all learned a lot, and it was a more impactful experience.
But hey, nice. So I was very happy to see that paper. When I saw it, I immediately looked in, and I was, I think it's well written. Okay, I think we talked about the most important stuff. Maybe to slowly wrap it up. Okay, so do you have maybe you already gave a lot of advice, but when you could just think about one thing, if you would give people who are starting with this whole thing, like working on their writing skills, maybe trying out the peer feedback, think about what would be just one piece of advice that made the biggest difference for you?
I think for me, it's enjoy the process, and yeah, let it go.
Yeah, +1.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experiences and your insights.
Thanks
I
for
hope
the
this will be
invitation. Yeah.
useful to other people as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.